If you want to make some extra money with your programming skills, stick around because in this video, I'm going to show you what web scraping is and how you can use it to make some extra money on the side. So what is web scraping? Web scraping is just passing a HTML page to extract data. And where can I use that to make money? You can offer your scraping skills as a service on Fiverr. You can scrape leads for products or services, or you could scrape data to sell to a company. So why would you do scraping? Well, the jobs are relatively quick and easy, and it can help you improve your programming skills. So let's have a quick look on Fiverr and look at all these jobs that are offering scraping. This one here will write you a script to scrape some data, and they're going to charge $71.41 as their cheapest offering. There's some cheaper ones here, and there's some that are around the middle. So I had a friend ask me today to scrape the data off this page. And you can see that there is a lot of data here. And they sent me a screenshot of what they would like the data to look like. So you can see here we have a title, and then we have 4 names. And then each name has this little number. And there's several numbers, but they just want the first number and then the last number. So let's get started by installing 2 dependencies. We'll install Axios and we'll install Cheerio. And Axios is going to let us make requests. So we're going to download the web page with Axios. And then Cheerio is going to allow us to manipulate the HTML a lot like jQuery would. Once those dependencies are installed, I'm going to make a new file and I'm going to call this index.mjs. And MJS is going to tell Node that we're running a JavaScript module here. And this will allow us to use top level await. So if we have MVM installed, we need to make sure we're using Node version 14. We're going to import 3 dependencies. The first one is the file system. The second dependency is Cheerio. And then the third dependency is Axios. I'm going to declare my URL, and this is the page that I want to scrape. So I'm going to make a let, and I'm going to call this page. I'm going to create a try catch block. And this is so I can download the page and store it in a local file. So if that local file exists, I don't need to make a request to this URL every time. So I'm going to say page is equal to fs.readFileSync page.html. And if this page doesn't exist, it's going to throw an error. And when the error is thrown, I'm going to say page is equal to Axios. I'm going to pass in the URL, and then I'm going to call .then, and then I'm going to say res.data. So when our page downloads, we want to save it to a local file. So we can say fs.writeFileSync, and we're going to save it as page.html, and we're going to save the page data. So let's save our file and run this script. And we see our page.html appear here, and this is the web page. So we don't need to make any more requests to this page here. The next thing we need to do is to call Cheerio.load, and we're going to load Cheerio into this $ constant. So let's go have a look at the page and look at the data that we're working with. So if we look for the first title that we're going to look for, we can find it down here, and we can find the wrapping div is going to have an ID of content. And then we have this container, and our container contains all the data that we're going to need. And then down below, we see another one, and we see another container. So let's come back to our script, and the selector that we're going to need is going to be ID of container. And then inside of that, we're looking for a class of container. So let's say const rows is equal to, we're going to use our $. I'm going to say ID of container, and the child of that will be a div with a class of container. I'm going to map through these values. And the first property will be the index, and then the next property will be the element. And in this case, we're going to call it row. So we can say const title is equal to $row dot find. And if we have a look at our HTML, we can see now that this is our row, and we're looking for a H4 inside of row. So I'm going to say H4, and then I'm just going to get the text of that title. So let's console log our titles and we'll run our script and make sure that's correct. And we'll console log our rows as well. Okay, so this looks like it's done something, but it looks a little bit funny. So after .map, we need to call .get. Now let's run this again. We get an empty array. So let's return our title. And we're not getting anything here. So it is probably because our selector is wrong. So let's go have a look at this. So we're looking for container and container. So this is correct. The class is container, but the ID is actually content. So let's change this ID to content. And you can see we get all of our titles here. So the next thing to do is to map through these verse groups, find the span, and we need to get the strong tag, and then we need to get everything inside the sup. So I'm going to say const verse row is equal to $, and we're going to pass in my row, and I'm going to say .find. And the selector that I'm going to use this time is div.row.text.verseGroup. So you can see this is it. So you can see this is that selector here. It's a div.row.text.verseGroup. You could also remove the div, and you could split these up like this. So I'm going to do the same thing here with these verse groups. I'm going to map through them. So I'm going to say const verses equals verse row dot map, and we have another index here, but I'm just going to use 2 underscores to represent the fact that we're not going to use that index. Then I'm going to call this a verse row. I'm going to say const who, because we're now looking for these names here. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, John is equal to $verse row dot find. And the selector that I'm using for is this class with span 3. Class span 3, and we're going to map again. And I'm going to put 3 underscores here to say that we're not using it and to make it different to these 2 underscores. I'm just going to call this span. I'm going to say const verse equals $, pass in our span. I'm going to say .find, and I'm looking for a strong tag. And I'm going to extract the text from that node. The next element I'm looking for is those sups. So I'm going to say const sup equals, and I'm going to pass in the span again. I'm going to say .find sup .map, and let's call this sups. And we'll put in a few underscores. I'm going to call this sup. And I'm going to return $ again, sup.text. And these are going to be numbers. And so I'm going to pass these to ints. So let's print these out and have a look at what we have. I'm going to console log verse, and I'm going to console log these sups. And I'm just going to comment out this console log. Okay, so we're getting this funny objects here again. So it looks like we need to call .get after each map. So I'm going to say .get. And we have another map here. So I'm going to call .get. And let's try this again. And this looks much better. So with these sups, he just wants the first one and the last one. And if we have a look at the image, they're separated by a dash. So let's say const sup text is equal to, and I'm going to put in my template strings, and I'm going to put in the colon, and then I'm going to say that this is equal to sups, and this is going to be the 0th element. Then I'm going to put a dash, and I'm going to say this is equal to sups, and this is going to be sups.length minus 1. And this is going to get the first, and then this is going to get the last. But let's just say if subtext.length, then we're going to do this. Otherwise, it's just going to be an empty string. So now let's return, and we're going to say verse. Then we're going to add our subtext. And I'm just going to call .trim to get rid of any weird white space. So let's remove these console logs. And we also need to add who. So let's add who to the return. And let's run this. Okay, so this is wrong. It's supposed to be if subs.length. Try again. And this is not who, this is versus. And we can just return. So we need to console log the rows again. And this looks pretty good, but our verses here have this load Cheerio. So we may need to call .get somewhere. And you can see here we have this map. And we're not calling .get, so let's add .get. And this looks perfect. So now let's save this to a file so we don't have to copy it from the console every time. I'm going to call fs.write file sync. I'm going to call this data.json. And I'm going to say json.stringify. And I'm just going to stringify the rows data. And I'll put an empty object in here for the options. Let's run our script again. And we see data.json appear. So your client will often want this in CSV or Excel. So you can come to this website here, and this is Json to CSV Converter. You can pass in the CSV here. And then you can click download and you can format these rows however you like. So that is how to make money scraping websites. Thank you for watching. If you learned something, please make sure you like the video and subscribe. See you in the next one.